Try for a moment to imagine the individual you most likely think makes minimum wage. To me, it's a teenager working at a fast food restaurant. To you, it may be the kid that brings a newspaper to your front door. In reality, many of the people attempting to survive on minimum wage are not temporary workers at all. In fact, the average age of a minimum wage worker in the United States is 32. The average time in that role is 14 years. These people are stuck in these jobs for the foreseeable future. Doomed to an economic reality of indefinite poverty, these individuals have a rough life. People working full-time jobs, 40 hours a week, for $15,080 a year, for over a decade. Rougher still is the fact that a good number of people working on minimum wage support families. Sure, you may be thinking, a small number of people may be in that situation where they struggle. Okay, but how common can it really be? ChildHouse.gov, a U.S. government entity assigned to track just those figures, states that in 2009, 21% of children ages 0 through 17 lived in families below the official poverty line. 21%. 15.5 million children forced to live in unsafe conditions, go without not only luxuries, but also necessities. Children without a safe place to sleep or a meal to fill their stomachs. If 15.5 million people were affected with any sort of disease, it would be an epidemic. We've created a situation with the current minimum wage level where our children are being forced into an epidemic of poverty with no way out and no way to save themselves. Consequently, many of these children find themselves forced into working situations as soon as possible, usually before the possibility of any advanced education, so they don't go to college, they don't learn any skills, because they need the money quickly, because the money their parents are bringing in isn't enough. The current minimum wage levels in America are set to levels which are inadequate. The current minimum wage is $7.25 an hour, which comes out to $15,080 a year for a worker working full-time on minimum wage. The poverty level in the United States was set at $23,050 for a family of 4. 21% of all people living on minimum wage are the sole breadwinner in a household with a family. Even if minimum wage standards hadn't increased in the past 40 years, simply keeping up with inflation would have put the minimum wage at $10.65. If the government declares that a certain dollar amount is necessary for the safety of individuals and then creates a situation where the minimum wage will not get them to the level deemed to be safe and reasonable, then the system is set up to create people too poor to live safely, a fate unfitting for any individual. But you may be asking, but I'm not going to make minimum wage. Why does this matter to me? Raising a minimum wage would help the entire economy, not just the people earning the minimum wage. 7 out of 10 fastest growing occupations would be affected by a change in the minimum wage levels, clearly impacting the economy as a whole. At 70% of our nation's GDP, consumer spending is an important aspect to economic recovery, and a viable solution to the recent downturn in spending is to ensure that income disparity doesn't eliminate millions of potential consumers. In 2009, with a slight increase in the minimum wage, consumer spending increased $5.5 billion, and it is estimated that restoring minimum wage to historic levels would create a $60 billion increase in the same way. Putting more money in the hands of the consumers allows them both basic necessities and buying power, increasing the well-being of both the individual and the businesses that they frequent. But if giving people a higher wage has such benefits, there has to be a reason we're not passing legislation to support it, right? The common assumption about the downsides of raising the minimum wage have been proven to be largely untrue. Many believe that raising the minimum wage, even back to historic standards, would create a significant job loss, with businesses not being able to afford the change. Studies began in 1994 at Princeton University into that very topic, with 2 economists studying employment levels before and after a localized raise of the minimum wage in New Jersey. Contrary to expectations, job loss did not occur in the area. In fact, economists noticed that there was a rise in employment. One isolated study could be ignored, But since 1994, many studies have been done. In 2012, the University of Massachusetts, University of North Carolina, and the University of California all published a joint study which compared adjacent counties in different states. So you have the border of a state, and on two sides, identical demographics, the only difference being the minimum wage rate. Over a 15-year period, they showed consistently that minimum wage increases on one side of the border didn't lead to job decreases on that side as opposed to the same demographics without the increase, essentially negating the idea that minimum wage increase would necessarily decrease jobs. Although the simple logic may lead one towards a false assumption about job loss, it must be remembered that much of the proliferation of these campaigns can be attributed to the businesses lobbying to keep themselves as profitable as possible. As such, I would ask that you focus on what could be an incredibly great way to help both individuals and our economy, and agree that raising the minimum wage should be a priority for our government. In order to do anything, however, one must be aware of the implication of any proposed plans. Currently, there are social pushes for increases to the minimum wages in varying amounts. In July of 2013, 100 economists from universities, including many Ivy League institutions, signed a petition in support of a bill authored by Congressman Alan Grayson of Florida. The bill, which is called Catching Up to 1968 Act of 2013, seeks to raise the minimum wage at the federal level to $10.50. The bill has widespread support among the academic community, and with two key facts in support. Number one, the minimum wage in 1968, which, given the name, is where we're trying to get back to, adjusted to the current dollar value, just adjusting for inflation, would be $10.65, as I mentioned earlier. Additionally, however, something that most people don't take into account is the fact that we work harder today. The average American is 135% more efficient at their jobs than they were in 1968. Some of this may be technology, but we do work hard. When you take the activity variance as well as the inflation variance, the economists all concluded that it would be the equivalent to $25 an hour in today's terms. Instead of pushing for something which may negatively impact the economy, such as something maybe sort of ridiculous at $25 an hour, the bill proposed only seeks to increase the minimum wage to one of the variances, namely inflation. At the level proposed in the bills, the group of economists state that even minimum wage intensive industries, such as fast food, where many of the workers, the majority of the workers, make minimum wage, even those industries would be able to absorb the change with ease. In fact, the total cost increase in business costs for fast food restaurants proposed in the bill is a whopping 2.7%. 2.7% can be absorbed in a multitude of ways, with the most common ways being a slight price increase, which would be passed on to the consumer, or by increasing productivity due to a lower turnover. If you're making a livable wage at your fast food job, you don't have to quit and try to find something better and something different. You don't have to try to work two jobs. And in doing so, the businesses themselves don't have to train new people at so often. So, in fact, by raising the cost of a Big Mac by an average of 10 cents, the entire cost incurred from the change from current federal minimum wage levels to the proposed $10.50 would cover the cost completely. It would negate the change. The business would not have to absorb any of the cost. Are we really the type of country who would rather have an extra dime in our pocket rather than allowing our fellow human beings the decency of livable wages? 45 million Americans will be affected by this bill, with nearly 91% being adults. Currently, the bill is at the stage where it has been introduced to Congress and assigned to a committee to assess the feasibility of the project. This is the perfect stage to be able to impact the progress of the bill as a group. On the screen, you will see a website which you can visit to make your voice heard in support of H.R. 1346, which is the bill 1346 brought about in the House of Representatives, which is this bill. As you can see, the current prognosis, according to Congress's own website, leaves a 2% chance of this bill making it even past the committee and getting reintroduced to Congress as something that they can discuss again. Furthermore, unfortunately, the bill is projected to have a 0% chance of passing and being enacted. A 0% chance on a discussion of basic human decency, on allowing people the opportunity to be safe and healthy and raise a family in the same conditions. A 0% chance on a change of 10 cents to our Big Mac prices, which would mean that 15.5 million children aren't forced into poverty through no fault of their own. Only with enough support will such a movement gain traction. There are big money interests that are directly opposed to this, as the capitalist model doesn't like to give out money and pay its workers more. And we have many successful capitalist ventures here. To counter this, the voices of the people must be louder than the voices of the corporations, and their message must be more resolute. People deserve safe and livable conditions, and currently our system is set up in such a way as to ensure that tens of millions of people live below the poverty line. If, as a society, we come up with a figure that's supposed to be safe and livable, and the minimum wage does not bring people to the basic need level, then what are we protecting them from?